Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here today, and I'm going to talk to you about my lifelong passion, which is water. And as I was thinking about this story, I asked myself, am I telling a human story from a water perspective, or am I telling a water story from a human perspective? I really don't know, and I think the answer is I'm probably telling both. There's a global water crisis that's unfolding right now. The narrative on this is very negative. We keep focusing on the risks, and what I want to talk about are the opportunities that are inherent in these risks to drive positive change in the world while we reduce these risks. We can meet today's challenges and start building a better tomorrow. And along the journey here, you're going to see a redefined role for industry. There's a business case for that, and I'm going to sketch out what that role looks like. But I do want to share, given the introduction, a little bit about my personal journey in water. I grew up in Florida, the beautiful beaches, the lakes, the incredible springs, and my lifestyle was a part of that water. And as a child, I began to notice little impacts, maybe some litter or some signs of pollution in the system. And when I was a child, I began to develop a defensive urge on behalf of the environment. And then somebody, when I was a teenager, reached out, grabbed me, and I was able to participate in a youth leadership program. I went to the state capitol. It was all pretend. It was all a mock process. But I was elected to the House of Representatives, and I sat down and I promptly wrote a bill to protect streams and rivers from polluted runoff. I was 16 years old. It was 1984. And as I flash forward now, 30 years, there's so many people that are talking about water and so many people thinking about water. And you know, with this population growth, economic development, and climate change, people are really focused on the risk. But I'm an optimist. I say, let's focus on the opportunity. The problem with focusing on risk is inherently a function of the perspective that you're looking at an issue. We could be looking at the exact same problem, but our risk is different. And so it produces insular thinking. But when you start to pursue opportunities, you can really have collective action and drive a lot more progress against the issue. So I want to explain the global water crisis to you, but I think the only way we can understand how we've arrived at current state is we need to go back, and I need to tell you the history of the human relationship to water before we can really understand how we got into this crisis. So what I'm going to offer to you in 2 minutes is the history of the human relationship to water. So hang on to your roller coaster bars. I'm going to go fast here. So it obviously begins with hydration. That's the very beginning. We cannot be very far away from water in the early years. We didn't veer very far from water. We needed to drink, albeit unsafe water at the time. Today, 1 billion people, or nearly 1 billion people, still lack access to clean, safe drinking water in the world. This is the period of sustenance, right? So we're drinking water, and then we began to harness the power of the seed, and we began to use water for our agricultural productivity. And at that point in our history, we forever linked our food security to our capability to sustainably manage water resources. But water is not just about what we eat and drink. Water was also the means by paddle and sail that we were able to begin to trade across geographies, connect with other cultures. So it was by water that the world began to become global. But then we enter this interesting period from about 1800 to the year 2000, let's say, where it was just this massive growth in water use. And it's dominated, obviously, by the Industrial Revolution. We began to go with mass production. We wanted to produce goods that improve the quality of life, raise the standard of living, create economic opportunity for people. And so today, industry takes about 10% of global water use. So if I went back and said hydration is about 10%, cultivation and agriculture is 70%, and now you have industry at 10%. The other big dynamic that was happening during this period was we began to produce a lot of electricity. And so you need a lot of water to produce a lot of electricity. And we're going to be continuing to electrify the world. Now, clean technology, we'll take a nibble on that. We're going to move toward more clean technology, but the rate at which this water crisis is unfolding, we're going to be still using a lot of water-intensive energy production. Globally, energy takes about 10% of water use. So now we move into this other period, which I was just calling the period of security. Everybody's concerned about water security, and they should be. And the big dynamics to pay attention to here are obviously globalization, right? We're connected technologically around the world. Our economies are connected around the world. Our industrial supply chains are connected around the world. So if I want to manufacture something, typically I'm going to be relying on materials from one geography. I might be relying on a part from another geography. And if that area is having an unsustainable water balance, that can have a transboundary global ripple effect. And so the risks, we become critically coupled all around the world, and water is what critically couples us. And then we're in the age of proliferation. So we know that right now the population in this current decade is going to increase by about 0.8 billion. You've got emerging and developing economies that are all trying to improve their standard of living and improve their economic opportunity. That's going to have a huge pull on the global system, and they're going to need a lot of water to fuel that growth to improve their quality of life. And then intensification. This is part urbanization, but it's really about agriculture. And right now, the experts will tell you that about 5 to 10% that we can only expand the agricultural land area by about 5 to 10%. Yet we're going to need to increase agricultural productivity by 50 to 70% to meet the needs of a growing population. So that's going to speak to the need to intensify agricultural productivity. And we've got to do that in a way that's good water stewardship. So those are the big trends, and again, it's about 2 minutes or less, the history of the human relationship to water. But if I stopped the story right there, I'd be missing a very important element of water. Water is an important part of our spirituality. Every major faith on the face of the earth has water as a part of its spiritual rituals and important spiritual rituals, baptism, Hindu and Islamic ablution. And it's an important part of our sociology, right? I mean, we play in the water, we go to the beach, we recreate around that, we go to the pool, we convene with each other. It's a huge part of our lives. So what this the history of water tells us is that A, we have this incredible rising demand, our physical dependency upon water, our economic dependency on water, and our emotional connection to water. So these are all variables that if you really want to understand how to convert these risks into opportunities, you have to begin to understand that, because it begins to define the opportunity space. So as an industry, we began to look at this, and we started to ask ourselves some very strategic questions. We started to say, what does this really mean for our business? And we quickly realized that, yeah, these trends are concerning, we understand them, but we really don't know what it means at any one specific place on the planet. And so we began to do some analytics, and we began to break the world down, and we started to look at population growth, economic development, and climate change, and what the water use requirement was going to be, and what the available supply is. That relationship between supply and demand defines the stress level, and what you're looking at here are current state conditions. Now, you see some red on the map, and that should be a concern. The reality is that most of these geographies have adapted. They have things in place that kind of help them maintain that balance. When a drought comes in, it's a shock effect on that system, and it causes problems. But when you start to look out over the next 10 to 15 years, is really when this story starts to get very interesting. So in this current decade, in this time that we're at right now, we're going to see the single largest increase in human water use in the history of the world. It's happening right now. And so what you see here on this map is the change in water stress. And what it's telling you is a lot of areas are going to change. A lot of areas are going to be more stressed. And what I would also tell you is a lot of areas are going to get worse fast. And so when you start looking at that, the speed of onset of an issue is something that you have to be paying attention to. So again, we began to look at this, and for an industry, 10% for hydration and hygiene, 70% for agriculture, 10% for energy. So industry is only about 10% of the water use. And with all of this unfolding, our primary conclusion, first of all, was we can be super efficient with water, and it's not going to touch this problem. We have got to find a way to be engaged outside of the four walls of our plants. And this is the moment where we began to redefine ourselves and redefine our role. And we understood that we had to be invested in the sustainability of the environment and watersheds, and we had to be looking at water sustainability in the communities. And the only way we were going to do that is through partnerships and collective action with civil society, government, and business all working together. So I implement a lot of strategy around the world, and one of the barriers to really taking collective action is aligning all the different parties and stakeholders around some themes that we can all see shared value in. So what I want to share with you here very quickly, I'm going to kind of pop through these themes because they're really powerful concepts, and they begin to reveal and deconstruct this water crisis and show us some of the places where we can put pressure points on the system to help improve the global balance and drive opportunity. The first that I would share with you is obviously on agriculture with 70%. So our strategic theme needs to be, A, we need to make sure our sources of water are sustainable for agriculture. But when it comes up out of the ground, we need to make sure we have good stewardship practices to do that as efficiently as possible, and to make sure that there's no polluted runoff coming off that agricultural operation. We need to be understanding ecosystems, and this is the environment generally, but that's been good for a long time, but now we have to get deep and we have to understand exactly the services and functions of these ecosystems that really we rely upon. Nature is what stores water, it treats water, it transports water, it provides protein. All these processes are necessary for us as human beings. Water and health, clearly, with 1 billion people lacking access to clean water, resolving that issue is a priority. We cannot really begin to pursue meaningful social and economic development until that issue is resolved. But in the water world, you may know that women are disproportionately affected by this issue, particularly in developing countries, where 40 billion hours a year of productive time is lost with women toting water back and forth from the rivers. And school-age girls are also negatively affected by that, and I'll explain that in a moment. Water in the cities, this is less glamorous for a lot of the folks in the room, but engineers get pretty switched on about this. We really need to be looking at infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, efficiency of water use, and we also need to drive opportunities for industry to work symbiotically among industry and with the community. Climate, this is pretty straightforward. It's about floods and droughts. The droughts are major triggers for issues around the world, leading up to and including security issues, national security issues. We need to be working on making sure that we build resiliency into climate. Energy is very similar to agriculture in that we want to make sure we have sustainable sources of water for energy security, but we need to start to strip the water intensity out of energy production. Water in society, with all the technology these days and the need to educate and raise awareness and pull people into these strategies and educate them on hygiene and have them understand what their role is in this broader equation of trying to drive a more sustainable balance on water is a big opportunity. Let's not forget that we play in water, and it's an important value that we have on water. It's a huge opportunity to create interest in water. And it's also a big part of economies around the world. And then again, a less glamorous one, but a very important one, is we really need to be working on the policy and planning to make sure that we can restore a sustainable balance on water, and then begin to make sure that we can bequeath to the next generations a sustainable water balance and not have this water crisis for them in the future. Now what I want to share with you is, that's all policy and strategy and tactics. But what I want to show you is how we begin to unfold that and begin to create real opportunity for the world by leveraging water to do that. So the first case I want to give you is just a very simple one. It's a big, large-scale one, but it's pretty straightforward to understand. And as you begin to apply these themes, they really work in synergy with each other. So you would rarely do one thing, you're going to do multiple things, and that's really where the power of the approach comes in. So in this particular case, the Mexican government is very keen to mitigate climate change through reforestation. They're also working to restore a sustainable balance on their water. They have a lot of water issues that they're very concerned about. And like all governments, they really want to drive economic development. So us, working with the government and many other partners, we've planted nearly 5 million trees on 100,000 acres. And that's great. So it's achieving that climate mitigation benefit. But what it's also creating is we've been able to bring the community together and educate them on water issues, educate them on environmental issues. But what industry can contribute beyond just our financial contribution is we can also help build supply chains. That's what we do. And when you do interventions and things at this scale, you're building supply chains, and we're really good at doing that. And you can just get a sense for the scale of what's going on when you look at this nursery. Then you realize these are paid jobs. People are working and getting paid to do this. So, and you know, this is not a glamorous photo, and I'm an engineer, so I have to confess that, and maybe I should have done that first. But this is really important, because what happens is these are infiltration basins, small infiltration pits. As the water comes down, it hydrates the root zones of those trees and allows them to survive. And then the extra water goes down and it recharges the aquifer. So we're able to pursue two objectives at the same time. The next example I'll give you is on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And it's one of the 7 wonders of the world, a World Heritage Site, and it's being threatened by climate change, and it's being threatened by water quality runoff, polluted runoff from the land. And so the project here, we couldn't really do anything about at the project level with the climate change, but we can do something about that polluted runoff. So we began to work with the farmers, pull them together using cutting-edge agricultural techniques and GPS and technology for the more efficient use of water. And then we began to work on monitoring and water quality and understanding, okay, how can we really tune in fertilizer, pesticide applications and begin to reduce that pollutant load? Well, we've removed tons of pollutants from that system, and we're protecting the reef, at least the sections of the reef affected by that. Now, that's a good environmental project, but let's talk about why this is an opportunity and not just a sustainability project. It's an opportunity because, first of all, the reef is responsible for 65,000 jobs in Australia. It contributes about $7 billion a year to the Australian economy. But what's also neat about it is the farmers that implement these practices, and we have about 11,000 acres of land that are under this improved cultivation, over time they're going to see their yields increase, they're going to see their cost of inputs go down, their margins get better, and now you have a market force for protecting the Great Barrier Reef. So it's a win-win situation, and that's important. The last example I'll give you is working with Clean Water Access, and it's a good follow to Kelly's talk earlier. And in this project, it's straightforward. We're trying to provide clean water to communities that don't have it in Africa. And as we talked about, it's a major public health risk, it's a major burden on women, and we can do something about it. So what we've done, we've provided clean water to quite a few people, over 1 million people. And by just simply bringing water into that village and making it clean, this woman no longer has to walk all the way to the river, maybe 3 kilometers away to get that water. Now she can go to right where it is in her village. And you know, when she walked to that river, it was a security risk for her too in many cases. So that's great and it feels good, but what's one of the biggest barriers to women's economic empowerment? It's this. They're spending too much time, 40 billion hours a year, walking to toting water. Now they don't have to do that. But the other thing that we can do, because school-age girls wind up having a burden in toting water as well, now they don't have to do that. And they can go to school. So as part of these projects, we can put clean water in the schools, improve the educational experience for the kids. And, you know, and the key thing here is that these kids are now, these school-age girls, by putting in segregated latrines at the school, they are now able to get in there. The big obstacle to education of girls is not having segregated latrines post-pubescence. So we're able to create that. So what happens is these girls grow up on intellectual parity with these boys. And now you're planting the seeds for gender equity for future generations. So I want to end on a note here. You know, they say that a picture says 1,000 words. And for me, this picture says one word, and that's hope. And see, as we go forward and as we begin to embrace our fears, we begin to pursue opportunities, we begin to drive for collective action between civil society, government, and business, all working together, we can transcend these risks, we can pursue opportunities. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is a journey between fear and hope. And through industry being more sensitive, more responsive, and consistently engaged in trying to be a part of this overall solution, we're able to create something that you can create in no other way, and that's trust. And the first step in that journey is you just simply have to believe in that. Thank you very much.